France has become the latest country to formally recognise the State of Palestine. President Emmanuel Macron made the announcement in front of delegates at the UN General Assembly in New York, joining its G7 allies, the UK, Canada and Australia. But will this growing recognition change anything on the ground in Gaza? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, for decades, the UN has supported Palestinians in Gaza and pushed for peace. But repeated US vetoes, funding cuts and political division have weakened its influence. Now, with the crisis deepening, the UN's role is under greater scrutiny than ever.
It was history in the making.
Le temps est venu.
The time has come. This is why, loyal to my country's historic commitment to the Middle East, for peace among Israeli people and Palestinian people, I declare that France recognises today the State of Palestine.
Je déclare que la France reconnaît aujourd'hui l'État de Palestine.
That the United Kingdom,
the Commonwealth of Australia,
Canada,
recognises the State of Palestine.
A diplomatic shift which is reshaping global politics. That's despite the US's disapproval of the move by its usual allies, as it continues its support of Israel.
We can't forget October 7th, can we? Now, as if to encourage continued conflict, some of this body is seeking to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state. The rewards would be too great for Hamas terrorists for their atrocities. This would be a reward for these horrible atrocities.
Since 1948, the United Nations has worked towards finding lasting peace and security for a Palestinian state, most significantly through its humanitarian projects. But over the decades, the UN's work has faced political and operational challenges, including restrictions on UNRWA operations in Gaza.
Those against.
And more frequently, with the US vetoing UN Security Council resolutions, including demands for a ceasefire in the region, despite the other 14 members voting in favour. In strong condemnation for Israel's ongoing attacks in Gaza, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan gave an impassioned demand for an end to the suffering.
There's no war in Gaza. There are no two sides in Gaza. One side in Gaza is the regular army, armed with the most modern and lethal weapons, and on the other, there are other innocent civilians, innocent children. This is not a fight against terrorism. This is a policy of occupation, deportation, exile, genocide. Indeed, a policy of mass murder, all carried out by using the October 7th incident as an excuse.
Sürgün, soykırım, daha doğrusu bir toplu kıyım politikasıdır.
In the aftermath of countries recognizing Palestine, the world and the people of Gaza wait. Are these just words to appease critics, or will we finally see meaningful action?
Well, let's bring in our guests. In Hereford, in England, we have Mark Seddon. He's a former speechwriter to the UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon and Senior Information Officer to the President of the UN General Assembly. Joining us from Marseille, in the south of France, we have the journalist Faten Elwan, who has extensively covered the conflict in Gaza. And in Florence, in Italy, we have Siobhan Amelia Smith. She is a history researcher at the European University Institute. You're all very welcome to this Roundtable. Faten, welcome back to Roundtable. To you first, all this talk of recognising Palestine, we've had Canada, France, Australia, the UK and others. How do you feel hearing all of this week?
Heartwarming. It was really joyful to hear such a speech 77 years late, 60 souls being slaughtered to death, a genocide, and there's no West Bank to be recognized or Palestine to be recognized. Everyone was demanding us to be thankful or be happy, but I cannot stop think about what exactly are you going to recognize? Which Palestinian state are we talking about? And most importantly, why now? Why do you care that much right now? Is it conspiracy to make it easier for Israel to take over the West Bank? Because it was clear, the right far-wing government made it clear by Smotrich and Ben Gvir, the triangle of devil, this is how we call it in Palestine with Netanyahu, that yeah, recognize it, and we will make sure that we're going to take over the West Bank.
Thanks, Faten. I want to bring Mark in on that. Mark, it's a very good point Faten raises. Why now? Is this just diplomatic theatre?
I think it's more than theatre. I totally agree. It's 77 years too late. But what it does is actually, it does show that 80% or more of UN member states now recognize Palestine. It leaves the United States and Israel even more isolated. It enables the general populaces of all of those countries that have just recognized Palestine to ask all of those same questions. Okay, now you've recognized Palestine, what are you going to do to make sure there's something of Palestine to recognize? And that follows up with all that many of us have been pushing for a very long time, for the adoption of a militarized humanitarian convoy, if necessary, no-fly zones, all the rest of it, to give real to give real heft to all of this. I think that in many respects, these governments, especially the British government, obviously the German, the Italian government, still haven't recognized Palestine, but they've been forced to do this by the enormous amount of pressure from the publics. And I think there's going to be a lot more of this.
Thank you, Mark. Siobhan, to you, pressure is building on Israel, but so many other countries, we're seeing people on strike and protesting in Italy where you are. The support for Palestine globally has probably never been higher. That is the awful irony of the situation. The people in Gaza being starved to death, bombed to bits, and yet the world is looking in and right-minded people are standing on the right side of history.
Yeah, I think that the recognition hasn't come from anywhere. I think it's come from people mobilizing all across the world, from students to dock workers. We've seen it in Italy yesterday, but it's been ongoing since the first few weeks after October 7th. But I think the people require something more of these countries diplomatically recognizing Palestine. And I think I'm in agreement there with more of this cynic approach of, for example, the UK's recognition being based on certain conditions on Israel, not concerning actually that self-determination is a human right, and it doesn't ever and shouldn't ever come with conditions. So this is something that I kind of more into the feeling of that it is kind of a diplomatic tool at this point. At the same time, the General Assembly and, like you said, the support for Palestine is greater than ever before. So I think here we need a strong UN General Assembly to support that momentum moving forward.
Thanks, Siobhan. Faten, how do you feel about leaders like Keir Starmer in particular, when you have a country like the United Kingdom with defence systems and companies who are selling weapons and components for aircraft to the Israeli military that are then being used on your people? How do you feel seeing a leader like Starmer stand up, say he's recognising Palestine, but that industry of death will continue?
We totally skipped the fact that in the speech they said we recognize Palestine, but now we're demanding the Arab world to normalize relationship with Israel. So no, your speech is not strong. No, what you have in the context of it is not enough. Okay, politically, and maybe when it comes under legal terms, we will have a more stronger position at the UN. But if we have an Israeli government supported by the United States saying the decision of the UN is not mandatory for us and we don't have to apply to them, so what is the point? When we see the UK government saying that we will open the embassy only if Hamas is out and only if the hostages are out. So it's a condition recognition, like it's not a thing that comes out of understanding the need of the Palestinian to exist, to respect the idea of them existing. No, it's for gains for Israel again. So in between, I don't see any good deeds in between his words or his speech toward the Palestinians. He is still funding, he is still opposition, he's still supporting Israel. I mean, yesterday, Emmanuel Macron mentioned 7 Israeli hostages' name, and he only mentioned Rita Baroud, one Palestinian that he met and couldn't go to be with them in the assembly because the United States didn't give her a visa to be there, just exactly like Mahmoud Abbas.
Well, let's bring in Alanna O'Malley now, who's in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. Alanna is a professor of global governance and wealth at Erasmus University. Just come in on that issue of visas not being granted. How do you think that looks? The world looking in, United Nations General Assembly, all the fanfare, all the news coverage rolling hour after hour, and Palestinian leaders are not welcome.
Well, look, I think this is a really good example of the United States using everything in its toolkit to try to further marginalize and discriminate against the Palestinians and their kind of world representation and their right to be represented at the UN. But I think it is spectacularly backfired because there actually has been so much coverage and public attention and media attention towards the fact that the US has denied the Palestinian leaders their visas, that it actually demonstrates the extent to which the US is prepared to go to actually support Israel, even in violation of these normal diplomatic procedures. And I think that has actually backfired quite a lot for the United States because it further diminishes the credibility of their support for Israel. It really increases public criticism even more of the United States position. And it really is creating also diplomatic tension with other allies that they want to maintain relationships with over issues that quite apart from what's happening in Gaza. And for the Palestinian cause, of course, you know, naturally we would want to see them represented in the General Assembly in person as they have the right to be. But actually this has played out so much in the international media that they have gained more attention by the fact that those visas have been denied. So it's a demonstration of the extent to which the US wants to support Israel, but it's also it's really obvious that the US is also scraping the barrel in terms of what else it can do to kind of try to marginalize the Palestinian representation more and more. And I think the amazing rhetoric that we've seen from the Palestinians, both in the Security Council and yesterday, their standing ovation in the General Assembly, really demonstrates their resilience in the face of US opposition to their presence.
Thanks, Alanna. Mark, just come in on that point then. The United States, the utter, complete imbalance of power at the United Nations, that America calls the shots, has a veto on the Security Council and backs Israel to the hilt. How frustrating is that for the other countries?
Oh, I think it's been extraordinarily frustrating. We've seen the use of the veto time after time again. It was used just the other day, as you know. I mean, essentially, you are looking, in many respects, as the United States under President Trump, who's got very little time for the organization, by the way, essentially almost making themselves into a pariah state alongside Israel. But there's been a huge amount of focus on the Security Council, as you would expect. But you know, when the Security Council is incapacitated, the General Assembly has the power to pass resolutions called Uniting for Peace. It's done so repeatedly in the past. We saw the UN actually send the military into Korea during the Korean War. We saw the UN General Assembly Uniting for Peace resolution bringing economic and military sanctions to help end apartheid in South Africa. So, you know, the UN does have powers, and you know, it had the General Assembly has powers, but there's been a kind of reluctance to actually go the whole way to use them, in my view. But yes, I mean, look, the United States is extremely isolated, and of course, we now see a degree of speculation as to what Donald Trump's next reaction could be. Could the United States then unilaterally decide to recognize some of the illegal Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories? That's a degree of, I mean, the problem is we are in uncharted territory in many respects. There has never been a US administration quite like this one that is prepared to disregard international law in the way that it has. But of course, there's a huge risk to all of this, as everyone will know. I mean, Trump set great score by the Abraham Accords. The UAE, which sees itself as the champion of them, is saying very clearly, you recognize those settlements in the West Bank, that's a red line that you're going to cross. I mean, I know that a lot of people have been saying throughout, well, where has been the Arab League? Where are the Arab nations? But I mean, the bombing of Doha the other week has really crystallized things, I think, right across the Middle East.
Thanks, Mark.
You know, there are risks. Donald Trump knows there are risks in pushing ahead and ignoring the UN that he's in the way that he's doing.
Thanks, Mark. I want to go back to Faten. Faten, just remind our viewers why you are not reporting from the West Bank. You were from there, you have lived in Ramallah all of your life, and you are not reporting from there anymore. Just tell our viewers on Roundtable why that is.
Because I'm a victim of the gangsters of the Israeli government, that there's no red line in front of them, including terrorizing journalists. Like in Gaza, they kill journalists. In the West Bank, they terrorize them. So I did the series of reports for Asia Plus, Al Jazeera, right in the beginning when settlers were being weaponized by the Israeli government, and how they're taking over slowly, terrorizing the citizen in the Bedouin community. They didn't like this. And it started with threats, threatening me personally. I didn't shut up. They started to threaten me extra. They tried to threaten me through my family, and that was the hardcore in which I didn't take it seriously until they start calling my mother, by the Israeli government, calling my mother, telling her, you want to shut her up, or you have three options. Will come and arrest my brothers, Sami and Samir, or she will be in jail, or she will have a bullet in her head. And of course, I hope, again, I'm always betting that my mom doesn't know English, because if she heard this, she will totally kill me herself. It went so bad into assigning a settler to call me every single night from 1:30 in the morning until 9 o'clock in the morning, and they get you through a nervous breakdown. And when they touch the people that means the more to you, and they put you in a position that you really are the reason why your family is in danger, I had to evacuate to save my family from me. And this is the ugly part of the occupation, that they go even into the core of your existence, not your movement, not the freedom of speech, even when it comes to put you in a place that you are the reason why your family in danger.
Faten, thank you for sharing that. Siobhan, how do you feel when you hear a first-hand example of life in the West Bank? That is a journalist who is making extraordinary journalism, telling the truth about what's going on, and that is the reaction from Israel.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, I've heard a lot of these stories, having been involved in the kind of encampment in Florence for Palestine, and reading up, being aware of daily occurrences in Gaza and in the West Bank. I think it's awful, and I think this is where tides need to turn. There needs to be kind of not a blank check for Israel, and that starts at the UN. That starts in, I think, the most simple, basic thing. The kind of minimum that can be done is expelling Israel from the General Assembly, and there needs to be much more support, not just diplomatic recognition, but really attempts to see how can peace be restored, but also peace that is listening to Palestinians' voices and self-determination.
Thanks, Siobhan. Alanna, to you, let's talk about humanitarian aid. Where do you think UNRWA stands right now, and how can the world get aid to Gaza when Israel blocks absolutely everything?
Well, I think UNRWA is in a very difficult position now. I mean, the Israeli government have basically, completely undermined UNRWA, not just their access to the strip in general, but also, the kind of lines of logistics and infrastructure that they need to supply their aid has been totally disrupted. So unfortunately, we're at the point now where the question of aid is going to be decided on the actions of individuals and organizations rather than by the states themselves, because even European, or especially powerful European states, really aren't taking strong and concerted action to either facilitate the supply of aid to Gaza, to really put pressure on the Israeli government to open the border points, or even at the border points to facilitate the entry of the aid that's already there. And then, of course, the wider issue is the question of the economic pressures that can be put especially by the European Union on Israel, which they have failed to do so far.
Thanks, Alanna. Mark, back to you. We hear so much talk over the decades about UN peacekeeping missions. At what point will they deploy to Gaza? Is that even possible?
Well, I mean, this is part and parcel of the Macron, the French-Saudi General Assembly initiative, of course, but that comes after an agreed ceasefire. And of course, as we've seen throughout, each time a ceasefire has about to come about, Netanyahu has deliberately torpedoed it for all the reasons that we know. I mean, I would say that when it comes to humanitarian aid, it would be fantastic if the flotilla could get through. It would be fantastic if individual NGOs and individual governments can put pressure. But what I don't really get is that the General Assembly has the power, if it really wants to do it, to have enough member states to get behind a Uniting for Peace resolution that would instruct the Israelis to open the borders and allow humanitarian aid in. These convoys would be militarized. If they were fired upon, they would fire back. And also for the introduction of a no-fly zone. Now, no-fly zones have been used over Iraq when it suits the West in particular, over Kurdistan, if you recall, over Yugoslavia. So, it's... We of course spent months looking at the hypocrisy involved in all of this, and the double standards that particularly the Western nations have applied to the occupation of Ukraine as opposed to the occupation of the Palestinian territories. But I think now really is the time, on the back of this recognition of Palestine by 80% of the world. I think the United States has got to understand really that the world opinion is so. I've never in my life seen something that has galvanized people in such a huge way, and it's the pressure is enormous, and it's just got to be built up. I think that the destruction of so much of this global architecture that was put together after the Second World War around the United Nations, the contempt for international law, has really alarmed people, and countries, member states, have got to stand up for it.
Thanks, Mark. Faten, I just want to finish with you. As the UN General Assembly draws to a close this week, what would you like to see happen for the Palestinian people? What's the one key thing, one difference you would like to see this week make?
And the genocide and gather what my friend was saying before. You have power, use your power. I'm done with speeches. All Palestinians are done with speeches. I don't want you to recognize me. I don't want you to declare me as an independent state. People are dying. Stop this genocide. Use your power for this. Don't use your power in something that doesn't mean anything on the ground right now.
Alanna, just come in on that. Is there, apart from Israel and America, there seems to be a great push to help the Palestinian people, but we're dealing with an organisation that is only as strong as its members, and these two seem to have an awful lot more strength than everyone else put together.
I think I'd just like to add very much to Fatena's comments and also to what Marcus said there. We cannot make too much fanfare about these declarations of the recognition of Palestinian statehood, as if they were not always entitled to that recognition, as if they did not try for many decades to make that declaration of statehood, and they were ignored, and they in fact were delegitimized or attempted to be delegitimized by the very states who make such a big deal about recognizing this today. The only way to make sure that these declarations don't just serve as a fig leaf for political representation for Europe to clap itself on the back and say that it has done something about this genocide is to hold these states to account for not just the kind of pressure they're putting on Israel multilaterally and bilaterally, economically and politically, but also to what they're actually going to do at the UN. And I think the suggestion of a Uniting for Peace resolution is a good one. I think there's also other mechanisms. I mean, under Article 6, you can think about the possibility of presenting a resolution at the Security Council to have Israel removed from the organization. So there's a wider conversation here about if these states are going to be, declaring from the rooftops their support for Palestinian statehood, what does that actually mean in terms of the kind of multilateral pressure, resources, and real kind of political effort that they're putting into sustaining the institutions of global governance like the UN? Because as we've seen, especially in recent years, it's not Western countries who are leading on this at all. It is precisely the global South, because they understand better than Western powers do the effects of when the international community stands by and does nothing. And so really we have to hold, as citizens of all countries, we have to hold our governments responsible to actually matching their actions with their big declarations that they're making in New York this week.
Thank you, Alanna, Siobhan, Mark and Faten. Thank you all so much. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.